Hello and welcome to ProjectWise Administrator Fundamentals Accreditation course. ProjectWise Access Control and Security Concepts. In this lesson, we will learn the 9 different concepts of ProjectWise Security. At first, ProjectWise Security may seem daunting, but once these security concepts are fully understood, it should help us to set up security for our folders and documents that are stored in ProjectWise. Before we get started, let's go through some basics. The person who creates the folder is the folder owner, and we can see this information via the folder properties dialog window. The person who creates and brings documents into ProjectWise is the document owner, and we can see this information on the security tab in the document properties dialog window. We may not realize, but the folder owner and the document owner plays a big role when dealing with ProjectWise security, and we will get into more details later on. When we first bring folders and documents into ProjectWise, we can check to see if there are security applied to these folders and documents by selecting a folder or selecting a document, and then go to the Access Control tab. If everything on this tab is blank, that means ProjectWise users whose user settings allow them to create, modify, and delete folders and documents will be able to perform these actions on selected folders and documents. The only thing that ProjectWise users cannot do is to set permissions for selected folder and documents. Only administrators and the owner of folder and documents can do that. Even project manager, who is a restricted administrator, do not have privilege to set permissions for folders and documents, and therefore the option is grayed out. On the other hand, as we can see, Project Manager is the owner of this document, A1_floorplan00.dgn. And therefore, the option is now enabled and allow Project Manager to set up the permission for this document. As soon as we add a group or user list onto the Access Control tab, for instance, we are adding administrator group and click on the green check button on the Access Control tab to apply the changes. The individual, in this case, Project Manager, who is not a member of the administrator group, will no longer see the document. Hence, the philosophy of ProjectWise Security Concept number 1. Security in ProjectWise is exclusive. When access control is being set up only for a certain group of users to access the folders and documents, if we are not a member of that group that listed on the Access Control tab, we are being excluded from working with the folders and documents. And that includes viewing as well. We have just evident how a folder or document owner can easily block out everyone from accessing the folders and documents. We also know that only administrators and owners of folders and documents have the permission to set up folders and documents. In order to prevent folders and documents owners to accidentally set up permissions, we can go to the ProjectWise Administrator module, and in the Data Source Properties dialog window on the Settings tab, under the Miscellaneous section, disable the option Grant Implicit Change Permissions. This way, work areas, folders, and document owners do not have the extra rights to set up permissions. Go ahead and hit OK. Only administrators can, and whoever has been explicitly given the change permissions. We have just seen how Project Manager can select a document and set up the permission for this document. And we see that it can be done. ProjectWise does allow permissions to be set for an individual folder or permissions to be set for an individual document. It doesn't mean that's how we should do it, because ProjectWise Security can be inherited from the top level folders into the subfolders. As a matter of fact, the fewer security settings there are, the better performance ProjectWise users will experience. Concept number 3, user settings. Users must be given these basic permissions to create, modify, and delete documents within their user settings. And they must also be given these basic permissions to create, modify, and delete folders. For your reference, we have a PowerPoint slide here to capture the user settings that we need to give it to our ProjectWise users. Without these basic permissions, users will not be able to perform these functions, even if we give them full access to the folders and documents. If need be, when setting up access control for folders and documents, we can always remove their folder rights and document rights at a later stage. Concept number 4. When a selected folder and documents have access control, which, for example, specifies that Group A has create and read access and Group B has write and delete access, when a user belongs to both of these groups, then this user will have a combination of allowed permissions from both groups. And that will be create, read, write, and delete access. The only exception will be if one of these two groups specify no access. Then this user will have no access because this takes precedence regardless of how many allowed permissions that are granted to the other group. This same rule applies if a user is a member of both user lists. However, concept number 4 will not apply when a folder and its documents have access control, which references a group with one set of permissions and user lists with another set of permissions. If a user is a member of this group and a member of the user list, then refer to concept number 9 for more information. Concept number 5, no access. Setting up no access or denying users from a selected folder or documents is an extremely strict method to block users from accessing folders and documents. What we might not realize is that without needing to explicitly specify no access to folders or documents, concept number 1, if you recall, already help us to take care of this. Users will not have access to folders and documents if they are not a member of the groups and user lists that have been listed when setting up access control for folders and documents. The difference is if we explicitly specify no access, then later on, we cannot use workflow security to allow users to access the same folders and documents. If we follow and adopt concept number 1, later on, we can use workflow security to allow users to access the same folders and documents. Concept number 6, security can be applied in various places, both in ProjectWise Administrator and ProjectWise Explorer. We will take a look at it in more details. Whenever we apply security in the ProjectWise Administrator module, this type of security is considered as global because the security will apply to folders and documents that do not have its own access control when we review them in ProjectWise Explorer. We can apply security at the data source level via the data source properties dialog window. On the folder security tab, we set it up so that only administrators have full control. Everyone, which really means every ProjectWise user can view the folder structure. And then on the document security tab, once again, we set administrators to have full control and everyone will only be able to view the documents and its contents. Switching back to ProjectWise Explorer and take a look at the projects folder, which we know doesn't have its own access control. So we can see the security is actually inheriting from what we set at the data source level. On the other hand, the learn folder has its own access control and therefore whatever security is being set up at the data source level does not affect it. Apart from setting up security at the data source level, in ProjectWise Administrator, we can also set up workflow security via the workflow properties dialog window, the folder security tab, and the document security tab. as well as each of the workflow state, something to think about. For example, during the work in progress state, we want designers to be able to work on the documents and move to the content check state. As soon as documents that are in content check state, designers cannot make changes and cannot move the document to the next state. Designers are not listed in this state. And since designers are a member of the user list, which then provide read and file read access to the documents. Setting up workflow and state security in ProjectWise Administrator is also considered as another form of global security because reviewing the folder in ProjectWise Explorer show that any folder which has the designated workflow assigned will have the workflow and the state security automatically applied. The other two forms of global security are setting up security for an environment in the ProjectWise Administrator module via the environment dialog window, as well as user settings, because this will have a chance to inherit into the folders and documents when we review it in ProjectWise Explorer. Object security. This is when we select a folder or document and then go to the Access Control tab and explicitly set up permissions for the folders and documents. When a workflow and state security has already been defined globally in ProjectWise Administrator, and the workflow has also been applied to the folders in ProjectWise Explorer. If a folder and its documents security needs to be modified, this is considered to be modified workflow security. We will work on an exercise later on where we will modify the security for a folder which has a workflow already assigned. When a workflow has security applied, it will inherit down to all the states that are part of the workflow. When a workflow state has its own security applied, then the state security will prevail over the workflow security. As a matter of fact, workflow security, workflow state security, it's always referred as just workflow security. When a folder and its documents have security applied, so that is referred as object security, and a workflow assigned to the folder, the workflow security will prevail over the object security, with the exception that no access has been explicitly assigned to the object security. Finally, when a folder with workflow assigned and its permission is being modified in ProjectWise Explorer, then this will prevail over the object security as well as the workflow and states security, with only one exception, and that is no access has been explicitly assigned to the object security. When a work area is created, there are 5 standard roles that we discover when we review the Participants tab in the Work Area Properties dialog window. And they are Administrator, Leader, Team Member, Observer, and No Access. These 5 roles will not be displayed when we review the Access Control tab. Basically, these roles are just names we can conveniently use, and their folder permissions and document permissions are highlighted on this slide. Although we can customize the permissions for each of these roles, but they no longer reference the same name and will become custom. Abbreviations that are common between folder and document permissions is listed on the bottom left. For example, FC stands for full control, CP stands for change permission. Here are the folder permissions, and on the right are the document permissions. If we have been assigned as an administrator, we will have full control on both of the folder and document permissions. If we have been assigned as no access, then we will have no access to the folders and no access to the documents. If we have been assigned as a team member, we will be able to work on the folders and documents, except deleting them, and we cannot set permission for selected work area and documents. When setting up access control for folders and documents, it is important to understand that when a combination of users, groups, and user lists are listed on the access control tab and they have different folder and document permissions, for example, managers, user lists, can delete folders and can delete documents, whereas project leaders group cannot delete folders and cannot delete documents. Project manager listed here can only view the learn folder and subfolders, and having read and file read access to the documents in the learn folder. If project manager is a member of the project leaders group as well as a member of the manager's user list, and since project manager is also listed directly on the access control tab, then the user permissions listed here will take precedence. That is, project manager only has view access to the folder and the subfolders, as well as having read and file read access to the documents in the learn folder. So please be aware that with concept number 9, group permissions override user list permissions, and user permissions override group permissions. During this lesson, we have learned the 9 different concepts of ProjectWise Security.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and share it with others. If you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to this and Bentley's other channels. Thank you, and see you next time.